This violence on the land was increasingly out of tune with the mood of the tenant farmers, who were finding that the land courts set up by the new Land Act were fixing reasonable rents. And though there was a problem for those in arrears with their old rents, the return of better potato harvests and this successful working of the new Land Act meant that the crisis on the land was easing. But there was also another matter to which he now wished to turn his attention, of much more deeply personal concern to him. He had, the year before, made the acquaintance of Catherine, the attractive wife of an ambitious Irish Member of Parliament, Captain William O'Shea.
After the meeting of Parliament, Willie was insistent that I should give some dinner parties in London, and we arranged to have a couple of private rooms at Thomas's Hotel in Berkeley Square. We gave several dinners, and to each of them I invited Mr. Parnell. But in spite of acceptance of the invitation, Mr. Parnell did not come. One bright sunny day, I drove to the House of Commons and sent in a card asking Mr. Parnell to come out and speak to me in Palace Yard. He came out, a tall, gaunt figure, thin and deadly pale. He looked straight at me, smiling.
This was the beginning of a love affair that was to last for the rest of Parnell's life. Catherine O'Shea seems early to have convinced him that her marriage was no longer anything but a formality. And by the time he was sent to Kilmainham, she was already pregnant by him. The fact that she was still legally married to William O'Shea, a former captain of the 18th Hussars and Member of Parliament, seems not to have troubled Parnell at all, who thought of her as his own wife.
My dearest wifey, I'm very comfortable here, and I have a beautiful room facing the sun. The best in the present. There are 3 or 4 of the best of the men in adjoining rooms, with whom I can associate all day long, so the time does not hang heavy, nor do I feel lonely. My only fear is about my darling Queenie. I have been racked with torture all today, last night, and yesterday, lest the shock may have hurt you or our child. Oh, darling, write or wire me as soon as you get this that you are well, and will try not to be unhappy until you see your husband again. You may wire me here. I have your beautiful face with me here. It is such a comfort.
So Parnell wanted to get out of Kilmainham for a deep personal reason, as well as a political one. His growing conviction that it was time now to go for some alliance with the Liberals for Ireland's national ideals. The personal reason strengthened the political reason. Sometimes he wrote to her not just as husband to wife, but as king to queen.
Your king thinks very, very often of his dearest queen, and wishes her not to be sad, but to try to be happy for his sake.
Discreet negotiations were carried on between Gladstone and Parnell while he was here in Kilmainham, and in February 1882, Parnell was released on parole to attend the funeral of a nephew who'd died in Paris. He did go to Paris, but on his way, he stopped at Eltham to see his first child, a daughter to whom Mrs. O'Shea had just given birth, but who was ill and died almost immediately. Meanwhile, the discreet negotiations for Parnell's final release continued. One of the negotiators being none other than Catherine's husband, William O'Shea. It was, and was long to continue to be, a strange affair. Parnell was released from here altogether in May 1882 under a tacit agreement that's come to be known as the Kilmainham Treaty, though in fact nothing was written down. all now seemed set fair for a course of collaboration between the Irish Home Rule Party and Gladstone's Liberals. Then, out of the blue, came a terrible event. The Chief Secretary for Ireland, W.E. Forster, angered by the release of Parnell, resigned and was replaced by Gladstone's nephew, Lord Frederick Cavendish, who arrived in Ireland on the 6th of May, 1882. At about 7:30 on the evening of his arrival in Dublin, Lord Frederick Cavendish was walking back from Dublin Castle across Phoenix Park here towards the Vice-Regal Lodge over there, together with his Under-Secretary, a Catholic Irishman named Thomas Burke, when they were set upon by a gang armed with 12-inch surgical knives. One report has it that Lord Frederick Cavendish had a go at them with his umbrella, but it didn't do him much good. Both he and Burke were soon lying hacked to death on the roadway here. The assassins belonged to a secret society called the Invincibles and were eventually executed for murder. But they'd also killed, for a time at least, all chance of that alliance between Parnell and Gladstone's Liberals on which Parnell was counting for a really effective move towards Home Rule. In his woods at Avondale, Parnell now had to face the fact that many Liberals' mistrust of Irish nationalism, was it really as moderate as Home Rule made it sound, was much increased by knowing that however respectable Parnell himself could make it sound, dark deeds like the Phoenix Park murder could also be committed in its name. Parnell himself was often ambiguous about what he really meant by insisting that Ireland was a nation. So, would a domestic Home Rule Parliament fully satisfy Ireland's national demand? Or would it just be the first step towards a demand for fuller independence or even separation? This was what puzzled Gladstone, the Prime Minister, who knew quite well that neither he nor the Liberal Party could ever accept separation. And looking at Parnell's speeches in the past did little to solve that puzzle. In a speech at Cincinnati in the United States in 1880, Parnell had been reported as saying,
"When we have undermined English misgovernment, we have paved the way for Ireland to take her place among the nations of the earth. And let us not forget that is the ultimate goal at which all we Irishmen aim. None of us, whether we are in America or Ireland or wherever we may be, will be satisfied until we have destroyed the last link which keeps Ireland bound to England."
But the point of Home Rule was meant to be that it satisfied Irish national feeling while preserving the link. At other times, Parnell himself did make it sound as if it was just this that he wanted.
My advice to English statesmen would be this: give our people the power to legislate upon all their domestic concerns, and you may depend on one thing, that the desire for separation, the means of winning separation, at least will not be increased or intensified.
The hope of converting English Liberals to Home Rule lay not only in persuading them that the demand for separation would not be intensified, but that it would be stilled altogether. Yet, at public meetings, in Ireland at least, Parnell kept his options open.
Although our program may be limited and small, it should be such a one as shall not prevent hereafter the fullest realization of the hopes of Ireland.
With speeches like this, the Protestant landlord from County Wicklow had made himself the uncrowned King of Ireland. In the circumstances, it was a political gamble for the Prime Minister Gladstone when, eventually, in 1886, he decided to introduce a Home Rule Bill into the House of Commons with the argument that Home Rule would keep Ireland forever within the British Empire.
The concession of local self-government is not the way to separation and independence, but the way to strengthen and consolidate unity